Hello and welcome to Asia Gaming Brief's face-to-face series. This week we have something slightly different for you. I'm going to be talking with Alex O'Brien, who is a science writer who is working on a book on the mental benefits that can be gained from playing poker. She talks to us about her experiences with the game and also discusses some of the issues with regard to gender in the poker industry. How did you first get interested in poker?
I had a friend of mine who is also a writer and who one day couldn't make a meetup with me and just left me a message on my voicemail saying, "I'm sorry, love, I can't meet you. I played poker until 6 a.m. in the morning and I won thousands of pounds." Oh, and okay, none of this makes sense to me. So I called her back, left her a voicemail and said, "Teach me." And she did. And I just immediately fell in love with the game because you can learn poker in 5 minutes. The basic rules are easy to pick up. But what I loved about it is I immediately saw the different levels and the complexity of the game. And that what attracted to me, was what attracted me to the game.
What was the sort of turning point for you then? And when did you, I know you're writing a book at the moment about the actual game of, what it can do for your brain. When did you decide to do this?
Well, I think when there's a story I often talk about is that I was playing in one of the big Poker Stars festivals live events in London, where the buy-in was £1,000. And it was one of the first tournaments I played after having given birth to my daughter. I think it was in January, so she was born in October, so just a few months after. And I hadn't played in a long time, obviously. But there was a situation in which I got involved in a hand with, it was just about day one of this tournament was coming to an end. I was one of the chip leaders. I was doing really well. There was absolutely no risk of me not making day two. But I got involved in a hand and I made a decision based on emotion rather than on logic. And it was so traumatic for me that I just couldn't sleep days after because it was a silly, unforced error, right? I made a mistake. And oftentimes, when you make mistakes, you kind of go, yeah, you could, but this one just wouldn't go. This one just kept me up at night for days. And I then decided, okay, I'm never going to do this mistake again. So I'm going to make sure I get better at this. So I started studying the game in earnest a little bit with more focus. And the deeper I went into poker study, the more I understood that a lot of it is actually how we think. It's a mindset. You come to the table with a framework of thinking that helps you minimize the amount of risks you take and minimize ultimately the amount of mistakes you then make. And those then also, what I found as I was going deeper into poker study, I found that those really translate into real life as well. So I found the way I approached a poker game was exactly how I was then approaching everything else in life and decision making.
What would you say the key skills that you have learned would be? Have you learned to control your emotions more? Have you become? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is one of the, and I'm saying this as a woman because there's stereotypes out there that women are more emotional than men. Let's just nip that one in the bud straight away. Not true. There's science behind that. But the benefits to emotional control, understanding your own emotion, understanding where you are at, how you approach a situation, being fully self-aware, that, but as well as understanding your opponents, right? Or your counterpart, or your friend, or your husband, or your family member, right? Understanding where they're coming from and what their goal is and where they're at in sort of a discussion or a negotiation, that really is a core benefit if you study poker and if you study the game deeply. But the other thing is, now we know that poker has an element that you can't control, element of luck, variance, and how do you deal with that? You can reduce the amount of variance by studying and by becoming better at it, understanding the game better, and improving your skill set. But it will still happen to you. You will still lose because it's part of the game. And how do you deal with that, right? Accepting losses and accepting failure, that really trains you. I personally have found it hugely beneficial. And this is why I felt I'm going to put all this into a book. And I'm a science writer, so I am not just putting my personal experience into it. I am putting in hard data and science. So we're talking about emotions. What do they mean? Where do they come from? How do we handle those? So I found for the reader, the eminent experts in the field of emotion recognition, emotion control, self-awareness, non-verbal behavior. And I put all of that together. So the book is not a book that will teach you any poker or any poker strategy. And let's face it, I'm not a pro. And I have had recently a discussion with a professional poker player saying, you're writing a book about how to think like a poker player, yet you're not quite a pro. Like, that is true. But I understand what the fundamental blocks are.
Would you say that this peripheral research you've done, as opposed to study just on poker, has made you a better poker player?
Interesting. No, because there's core strategies and elements. There's real hardcore study that you have to do for poker. Like, you can't wing it. You can't just become a better people's person. And you know, there exists that misperception that poker is all about sussing out the bluffs and reading nonverbals. No, that's part of it. That absolutely is part of it. But there's real strategy, there's real study to be done. Which position, how many players, what stakes, what bet sizing, what are the probabilities of, what are the ranges? There's so much maths involved as well that, we cannot discount how complex the game is and how much study it involves.
Well, you've mentioned a couple of times gender. Obviously, it's sort of, there are a few sexual stereotypes surrounding the whole industry. Would you say that that's changing, that enough is being done to change those perceptions, or is it still very prevalent?
I think the fact that we are having more conversations about this is good, is definitely progress. I think generally it would be naive to assume for anyone, including me, that just because we are now able as women to talk about certain subjects that we were excluded from, that things are definitely changing.
There's a big divide when it comes to Asia and gambling, when it comes to games of skill compared with games of chance. For example, India, if you're playing poker and it's a game of skill, it is permitted under the law, whereas a game of chance isn't. And I just wondered whether this is something you've ever looked into.
Fundamentally, I think, and I'm hoping that, you know, by speaking about poker and its benefits, we might be able to show it as a skill-based game, despite its element of gambling and variance and luck. But right now, there's this huge misperception. Like, poker has an image problem. It is like in the gutters. Like, we know this, but also because how popular culture talks about it in the movies. It's often played to show somebody's demise, or mafia gang bosses, or underground dance, or the boys having a boys' night in, you know, and just like gambling, being hardcore. Yeah, but and other non-poker playing audience will see it as gambling. as pure gambling and as like detecting bluffs. Like they have a misperception that I don't know when it started and where it started, but it exists.
Thank you for joining us. I've been speaking with Alex O'Brien. Tune in every Friday for Asia Gaming Brief's face-to-face series, our interviews with thought leaders in Asia's gaming industry.